Okay, let's look into the lost knowledge of the ancients. And the question asked here in the article is, were humans the first? I want to preface this with the idea of people talking about ancient lost civilizations and all of that type of thing, right? Well, I don't know if you've been paying attention or how old you are, but during my lifetime, we have found one. And so much more. Um, it's not got me satisfied, or a lot of people satisfied, of course, because it just throws another question into the wrench, into crap hits the fan. Because we found Gobekli Tepe and the amount of knowledge that they had. And when you look at something like that, and they look back, and a famous thing that was said whenever I was a kid, that Cleopatra was closer to our time than she was to the time when they built the pyramids. That's how much difference of a time way and how far it goes back, and that's amazing. And I can remember still having a feeling whenever I first rationalized that. But then you look at it and you say, well, from us right now to the pyramids, past Cleopatra, there's another civilization. It's twice that old or more, and Gobekli Tepe, in the starting of civilizations. We've seen it. Now, everybody wants to go with an extreme older date, and I can't get that anywhere. And the only thing I thought of, and I've got these secret little things that might make it work, of course, and it's up there in that box on the shelf that I talk about. But they would have had to have done something like cremate their bodies all the way through this, every single one of them, and never leave anything except for a few scant little clues that they ever existed, like those 180,000-year-old metal pipes that are in China and things like that. It's almost easier to believe that aliens showed up and did some type of work, mining some kind of thing, and then once we started to get smart, they took off. Or they might have done something to us to get smarter on an evolutionary track, or who knows where we come out popping like popcorn at, and that's still one thing. But whenever you look at archaeological finds, and we get back to 165 to 180,000 years ago, and they tell you that the Caucasians from back then, which are the earliest of all humans, and the Caucasoids then really turned into Caucasoids pretty much, and it goes back to 315,000 BC, and that's all we can find so far. And of course, that's a new find. But when you look at it and people go primitive at that point, what I've always thought was there might be something in between there, because it's only taken us a couple of thousand years here at the end once we have all that knowledge and we're able to do something with it, and we're spacemen now, right? And not that we could have done that and turned into spacemen in 5000 BC or anything like that, but is there a possibility that people were going on much stronger before the last ice age, and then the last ice age caused a hampering and a problem in that whole rate? And was there a civilization that was going before that? And it's about impossible to find any archaeology that goes, but no one's going to dig that deep for any reason unless it's an accidental find. Kind of like whenever they found in Galt, Texas, they found Solutreans stuff, and they were one of the first places that proved that there's pre-Clovis people here, and it's quite a bit deeper than that. I mean, it's not like here they are and there they are. No, it's like here they are, and then it all went away. And oh, here's somebody showing up now. But people used to dig for arrowheads out there, and they dug up a whole area, and they give people a, they tell them, you don't want to go deeper than about 3 or 4 foot or whatever. You probably won't find nothing. Well, they started digging in the place they had already dug before, and dug down deep enough and weren't finding anything. And then all of a sudden, wham, they found something. But it's a big old blade, and things took off from that. So this look at an ancient civilization that was much more advanced, sure, there could be an Atlantis, and there could even have been one twice the date of that older. And could there have been one 60,000 years ago or 100,000 years ago. I guess it's possible, but it doesn't look like we're talking about humans then. And then, of course, they would have had to have evaporated themselves in some way or done something like cremate themselves, and almost to the point of ensuring that later people wouldn't see that, and that starts throwing people into aliens and stuff again. So just food for thought there, and what I've thought about it, I guess. And I'll go into it in other videos. And one day, if y'all really want me to, I'll take down that box that I'm talking about, and I'll start mentioning all those other things. Because, well, actually, there's a couple of them mentioned in this, and it's a four-parter here. So I'm going to do each individual part, and I'll probably release them simultaneously for you. Archaeologists and historians have produced a number of curious finds which still await logical explanation. The story of man will appear in a different light if the answers are even ever found. If the following facts are well founded, civilization might have had a much earlier source. This is the starting premise for them. And I think we've already found, versus what you're told maybe in school and stuff, versus what's out there already for people to look at. If you've watched a bunch of my videos and been with me, you find all these things that you don't hear about. Even if you're in academia, unless you're attached to it, you don't hear about it. And how do you start connecting and put it all together whenever you're specializing in one thing? Regardless, let's just go here. Foreigners in ancient China. In excavations at Zucadian, a cave system near Beijing in China, Dr. Weidenreich discovered a number of skeletons in 1933. One skull belonging to an old European, so I'm guessing we're thinking Cro-Magnon. Another to a young woman with a narrow-typed head, typically Melanesian possibly in character. A third skull was identified as belonging to a young woman with the distinctive traits of an Inuit or an Eskimo. A male European, a girl from the tropics, and another from the Arctic Circle are uncovered in a Chinese hillside. Sounds like the starting of a joke, doesn't it? Except they didn't walk into a bar, they were uncovered on a Chinese hillside. Now, they're not indicating that they were found in situation exactly together, but in digging this part of this hillside, all three of these skeletons were found. We know why the Caucasian type is there, for those Cro-Magnons got around like hell, and they helped herald civilization. But of course, back then, when we're talking about this, isn't really civilization as we call it now, but hell, it sure was a big step up, and the people that they interacted with always got a big step up too, and that happens even to this day. But then you've got an Inuit there too, and that doesn't make any sense until you think, well, this is during the last ice age, and so there would have been a huge continental shelf up and everything, and while we think of Inuits as only being Eskimos, it's quite possible that they weren't Eskimos, and they moved into that area and liked it and did well with it and stayed. And even though we came out of the last ice age, they crept up and stayed with it, and that's where you get, because very few Amerindians look like Inuits. Inuits have more of a flat, rounder face and stuff, and while there's Hopi tribes and things that definitely do show that trait, most of the other ones don't. And it's very possible that what we're looking at here is something that brought about a hybrid situation that ended up being an Amerindian somehow, and then 20,000 years later than that, they end up going across the bridge. But how in the first place did they get to China some 30,000 years ago? This episode of Prehistory is a mystery. Well, yeah, but you say 30,000 years ago, but we know that the people in Australia must have gotten there and it never was connected, and that goes about 58 to 60,000 years ago. So if you say somebody's able to go around in boats, that's one thing that has gotten me, that they've tried to say, okay, this all happens, this happens, and then there's boats. And it's like, no, boats came before. And now, in a more modern time, we realize boats came well before. For they had to have got to Australia somehow, and they had to have gotten to Japan somehow, and it doesn't connect into these other places, right? But something still falls strange with that. Let's just go on here to the next one. That's that cave site. And so they have this cave here and this other cave down here. So maybe it's in a similar cave type site, but are they really there in a together state? Might ought to read it up on it some more or something, but so we go on. Now we talk about straightened mammoth tusks. You know, this is an oddity in a oopart type situation. It almost makes no sense, but there was a straight tusk mammoth where he doesn't have the big hooks on him. But that's not what we're talking about here either. Did man in the last ice age possess enough technical facilities to straighten out a giant hooked mammoth tusk? Well, everybody say no, but until the discovery of 6-foot-long spears made of mammoth tusks in Sungir, Russia, no scientist suspected that prehistoric man had possessed the ability to transform a hooked tusk into a number of straight bone spears or anything of the like. For a long, long time after that, and I think there's a picture. Yeah, this is a recreation of their burials, and this is what they would have looked like at the time of their burial, and this is what they found. And they have those headbands and things that are on them, right? Caucasoid type, somewhat. But then you have these giant spears that are here, and they're straight, and they're made out of ivory, mammoth tusk ivory. How would you straighten that out? Well, sure, you think, well, I can go long ways and cut a piece off of there, and if I go through it, even though it's turning, I can make one that's pretty long. Yeah, you can get one about half that long. How do you get these ones that are that long? Must have been a hellish tusk and real straight. And then again, we see a whole bunch of them, so it doesn't seem like it was a rare type thing. One starts to think weird things, like there was a group of mammoths that had straightened tusk in there, or something, but we never found that. Well, they used them all to make the spears. See, now you have to get down and all. It just doesn't seem to make so much sense. There's another good part. At the same site, the Russian archaeologists found a bone needle, and that's almost more important. A replica of our own steel needles. Like the spears, it was 27,000 years old. The making of such artifacts by the Ice Age man was completely unexpected. In fact, it pushes back the date of something like that happening by double. And it shows that technology in the Glacial Age was far more advanced than previously thought. We start adding up some things like this, and we're going to say, man, from what I was told when I was a kid till a modern time, looking back at these people here, they were a lost civilization, because I was taught that when we were a kid, that, man, about 6,000, 7,000 BC, we were all ugh. And now we come to find out, no, we're looking at 30,000, 40,000, 50, 60, 70,000. People had a lot more going on than you would think at that time. So where's UGG come in at? And it's like, well, way down the road from where we thought for sure. There's a multiplier on it. Ooh, Jericho Skulls. The famous Jericho Skulls were filled in with clay and shells depicting exquisite Egyptian-like Caucasian faces. They have been dated to about 6500 BC, which is roughly some 1500 years before the beginning of the Egyptian civilization. This discovery poses many questions. Were their mummified faces the outcome of the desire to immortalize man? If so, it proved evidence of the existence of religion in a very early period. But abstract thinking does not come to man overnight. It's a long process, and from what source did the Jericho people receive it? Some people might ask that now at 6500 BC, but go back to Tepe at 10,000 and the Catalhoyuk and the things that led through it, and understanding now that they have definitely defined these people as Natufians, and that those are all connected in Natufia, like they said, Egyptians, end up making part of the Bidarian Nakata people whenever they come out. So here's just one of the faces that are shown here, and they use cool little conch shells in their eyes and make this similar face. And it's believed that what they did was they took the body out and let it be eaten by birds and take it up into the sky. They'd pop the head back off of it, and once it's gone through its rotting process, then somebody would sculpt onto it something that resembled enough to where the family thought that was him again, and they would keep this for a period of time there, and it's ancestor veneration. Would they keep it for a year or all these things? No one knows exactly for sure. They're utilized. What people gloss over all the time, though, is if you look at it right there in that forehead in this area right here, it's real glossy. And this is a plaster that is incredible for the dating. We just did a video not too long ago talking about, they said this plaster is better than the stuff that we were going that was thousands of years later at an earlier date. And you look at the plaster that's on here, and it's basically a type of concrete, if you will, but not so griddly. It's able to be polished, shiny, and everything, and that's not just clay. You'd almost say it gets to the edge of something like porcelain, but porcelain has to be all fried and everything, and there's no indication of that happening here. There's a bunch more skulls. That's actually not a very good one compared to some of the other ones. Okay, now we got something in the box up here. How about a 15 million year old shoe print? Well, in Fisher Canyon in Nevada, the imprint of a shoe sole was discovered in a coal seam. Yep, they found some weird things in coal seams. In fact, what looks like an ancient chariot wheel trapped in a coal seam before, and it was in the roof when they were digging a coal mine. That's in that box too. The shoe print is clear that traces of a strong thread are even visible. The age of the footprint was estimated to be over 15 million years old, but man did not appear for another 13 million years, and that's a hominid coming in, right? According to popular opinion. Primitive man appeared some 1.8 million years ago, but he only began to wear shoes about 25,000 years ago. So whose footstep could this be, and how could you have made a fossil inside of 20,000? Well, we're going to take a look at the picture, and it's going to blow you away because it looks like a modern shoe print. Double rimmed on the edge with extra stitching, and it almost looks like those old Red Wing boots or something. Straight up, almost with a roundish button impression where the heel was too and stuff, and that just, what could make something like that? And with the stitched look and everything else, I mean, it has to be something else created it, right? Couldn't be that. But to the eye here, it looks like a leather shoe sole that's got double stitching on it and everything. A rim around the outside, and that wouldn't look too much different from the imprint off of old Chuck Taylor Converse either. Right? Well, Dr. Chow Ming Chin made a similar discovery in the Gobi Desert in 1959. It was a perfect impression of a rib sole on sandstone. It was calculated to be millions of years old. Expedition people couldn't explain it. Nobody ever has ever since. And don't know how that works. How long does it take to become a fossil? Because this type of shoe, what the hell is going on here? And see, the weird thing is that you got to get me to believe that some million years ago people made shoes just like we're making shoes now. And while that may be one of the best ways and easiest ways to do it, what the hell is this? Yeah, it's in that box. So, oh, here's a neat one. The White Lady of Brandberg. The Brandberg rock paintings in southwest Africa depict bushmen together with white women. What? Well, they're trying to say they're bushmen. They're not. They're just red ochre men and pale women, just like you see in Minoans and Etruscan and Mitanni and Greek art, and the ancient Egyptians, who were all Caucasians too. But she says their perfectly profiles are painted with light tint, and the hair is shown in red or yellow. The girls wear jewelry and an elaborate headdress of shells or stones. The young, attractive huntress carries bows and water bags on their chests. They are wearing shoes, while the bushmen are not, apparently. Some archaeologists consider these young women to be brave travelers who must have come from Crete or Egypt 3,500 years ago. And that'd be a foolish statement to turn around and go, well, a bunch of women got together. So are we starting to talk about Amazon somehow? No, I'll clarify in a minute. However, there's something peculiar about the white girls, they say, and they're just painted with white paint. They look like Caspians from the North Africa who lived 12,000 years ago. Both have same long torsos, bows, headdresses, and garter-like crossbands on their leg. So it looks like those Capsians, who are related to the Natufians and all that stuff, had gotten all the way down in the Cape. Well, we find the Hoffmeyer site there, and they tell you it doesn't look like the Khoisan or anybody. Well, then who's it look like? Right. The White Lady of Brandberg, studied by the Ebb Henry Bruel, is a masterpiece because of her costume and a flower in her hand. Whenever I show you the picture, you're going to be like, man, they must have had a microscope. But here, she resembles a girl bullfighter from Crete. Well, if you look at them, they're showing pale women and red ochre males. In that exact art, when you see that bull dance and things that goes on, the bullfighting, the jumping of the bulls and all that stuff. But for some reason, no leopards or hippopotamus are painted in the gallery. These beasts were non-existent in that part of Africa a long time ago, whereas they are quite common now. Could the epoch of the white Amazons in Africa be more remote in ancient times? Well, the Amazigh is part of where we get the Amazons from, and people have looked at it and they say, well, the Scythians have the Amazons out in that range. Yeah, but you look at the other stories and everything, and they tell you there's Amazons right there too, down from Carthage and Tunisia and stuff. And there are some there too. And we can find the Berbers that are there, and there are pockets still left of blonde-haired, blue-eyed, red-haired. Yep, it looks like you're in Ireland or England or someplace, but lo and behold, you're in North Africa in the Atlas Mountains. But they have proven without a shadow of a doubt that they are the endemic people of that area. And how long does it go? Well, they just hang up there, because when the Sahara was green, you could go on down. And so she talked about Bushmen and things like that. Well, it wouldn't be a Negroid, the oldest Negroid skull ever found of Asalarman, and that's 4400 BC. So they weren't existing then. And any skull that's found before then is listed as Proto-Negroid, if you will. And the oldest one they found is 9100 BC, but they're talking about 12,000. So they pretty much didn't exist during this time. But that Khoisan type has been around for a long time, but also genetics, whenever they looked into it, they have admixed to them and everything, and the ancient Khoisan wouldn't have looked like the Khoisan do now. When people say they've been around, they've got admixed to them, they're not the same people. And they're an ancient admix too, so it isn't the same people in any way, shape, or form. So let's look at this picture here real quick. Man, I'd like to take a picture of that and use it for one of my ones about maps. What do you think? I've got one like this I haven't used yet too. It's got a compass and old map. So here it is. And they're showing you that here is apparently a pale person. Now I'm going to point out a few things here. They've got cattle, and we know who that comes from and where that originated. Take this off the picture if we can look at it. And then you see that's a dark cattle that's shown down there, but these other ones that are up here that almost look like they're colors of gazelles really look like Hereford cows that we have today that have that white face and belly and markings on them and white to them and everything. And these would have been the Caucasian heralds of civilization coming down and starting to farm and do all those things. Now, they say that is a white woman from da-da-da, but I'll be damned if this picture right here is not a person's legs, and there isn't a white person there too. But it looks to me like it almost, the paint came off, and when it did, it left a lighter spot. As compared to that white that you see there, That doesn't look like that. By contrast to, that doesn't look like that. And they're trying to say, look, you can see it. And I'm like, man, can you see it? In a second, I'm going to zoom in on that spot just so we can take a look. But I want to point out a couple more things first. They're able to use that white and make a whole lot of here. So what's it going on there? And there's a white person too. So what is that? Because there's some other children. They're that red ochre. Well, red ochre males and pale women and stuff. So are the women helping with all this stuff instead of being at home or whatever? Well, these people were pretty nomadic and they all went together. In fact, I see another palish looking person here and it looks like red hair on that. So I see what they're saying now. And if they said this one, I would go, oh, I kind of see what you're saying, but let's zoom in on this. I don't know, man. It's kind of blurry. I'm that type of guy that's going to want to look at that picture and then have them slowly morph into them drawing it out thicker, if you know what I mean, and pulling out the picture. I don't see any of the things that she's wearing shoes and all this stuff that they said, but I'm sure they see it. I'm sure they see it. We're at a distance picture here. But now saying that this would have been Bushmen is far-fetched. Everybody says, oh, Bushmen and everything. Well, not necessarily. And if you're going to say that's a white woman, these are the red ochre males that are her counterparts. No, there's not a bunch of white women running around in sub-Saharan Africa, although I could see people dreaming of that. Certain people. Strange depictions in Australian rock paintings. Australia, this one's pretty important. On a rocky cliff west of Alice Springs in the heart of Australia, Micah Terry discovered a carving of the extinct Notherium mitchellii in 1962. This is a early rhinoceros type. This animal had disappeared some 2,500 years ago in the same place. He also found 6 carvings of what looked like ram's heads, and they brought to his mind Assyrian pictures and depictions of the ram. A human being about 2 meters tall was among the intriguing rock images. Full legs and thighs and a mitre hat, which it looks like a bishop's hat or whatever, was resembling those worn by the pharaohs, made the figure totally look unlike the matchstick representations of humans drawn by the Australian Aborigines. Although the figure is in a horizontal position, it's standing as if it was walking down a wall. Strange. Well, I've made a video about how the Egyptians apparently made it to Australia, and there's this whole carving set that goes with it and everything else, and must be something to go along with that. Could this not be something along that line? Well, that mitre hat that they're talking about really looks a little more like the Sumerian hat that they had, or perhaps the hat of Dagon. And it could be, perhaps, the blue crown of Egypt, not the red or the white one, but the blue. They got different hats, red, white, and blue. So here we have another mystery. Carvings of an extinct animal rhinoceros, the ram, unknown in Australia until the arrival of the English, and a non-Australian man in a Babylonian or Egyptian tiara or hat. Did men from the Near East or Asia reach Central Australia in antiquity, and if so, by what means? It seems that our view of the extent of travels of ancient man should be amended. Well, a long time ago, I remember speaking directly to a professor, and he was dumbfounded, and I started talking about boats, and he was dumbfounded about it. I say that, but he was trying to come off as a, you don't know, little kid. And I go, well, how does Australia get there? And he started getting real red in his face, and all of a sudden he had to go. He was willing to talk to me for an hour till his next class, right when I started. About 6 minutes into it, he had to go. Let's continue. The mysterious megaliths of Marcahausen. And I may want to do a separate video on this. I need to look into it. But the discovery of megalithic sculptures in Marcahausen by Dr. Daniel Russo in 1952 was a momentous one. Marcahausen sits 80 kilometers northeast of Lima, Peru, at an altitude of 4,000 meters, where the air is cold and hardy. Anything is grown amidst the granite rocks. Standing in the amphitheater of rock, Russo found himself confronted by enormous figures of people and animals carved out of stone. Caucasian, black, and Semitic faces looked at him. I'll need to look at that picture because he thought somebody was a Bushman before just because they're drawn in red ochre, and I think a lot of people make that silly mistake. If anybody studied the art of any of these people, they'd be like, oh, that carries on for thousands of years. Look, here it continues. Lions, cows, elephants, and camels, which never lived in the Americas, surrounded Dr. Russo. Sculptures of horses posed a burning question. Since the horse died out in the Americas about 9,000 years ago, and it really wasn't a riding horse at that time, this gave a definite date to the ancient stoneworks. The horse reappeared in the New World only in the 16th century when the conquistadors brought it from Spain. And here's some pictures where the guys have said, ooh, that looks like a face. And ooh, that looks like a face. And the one on the left looks like Alice Lagoon and her nose is smeared off. But it kind of looks like the mouth may have been carved somewhat. The rest of it doesn't look so good. And if I was to tell you, we went through time right now. We're going to go through time. 100,000 years and then come back and we're going to go to Mount Rushmore, and now you're looking at a side view of what's left of George Washington. Could you see it? So that's the problem I have with that shit in the box. You know what I'm saying? It just comes across as too convenient to make up the right story for it. Let's just put it that way. Yeah, I still got this shitty lighter here that will not light. I'm gonna go buy another one today. Look at this shit. It's full of fluid. Look at this. It's full of fluid. It's just one of those bullshit lighters. And really, it's like the flint don't work. And as much as I'm flicking it, it's going to do one of those things where it pops the flint out of it and still be full of fluid. This is going to piss me off. So this looks a little like, you know, Henry David Thoreau, or some people might even say Abe Lincoln or so. And I don't know that that looks not anything but just natural, and I can see the face in the clouds. And then you got this one here, and it looks like a mouth, but the nose would be too high and everything, and that kind of looks like eyes, and I see it. I see what you're trying to see, but at the same time, I don't know. You're going to have to go up there and look at it and say, well, it's been carved to look like this, or is this natural? And if it's natural, yeah, even if the old people worshipped it and everything, did they carve it? Or did it just look like a person? The mysterious sculptors of these giant monuments were aware of the laws of perspective and optics, he says. Some figures can be seen at noon, others at other times, vanishing as the shadows move. Well, I think that tells you that it's just an optical illusion with your eyes, and it helps out the effect. To find this millennia-old museum exhibiting animals that never lived in South America or had been extinct for tens of thousands of years, as well as sculpted portraits of people of various races who came to the New World within the last 500 years, was a challenge to orthodox science. Well, I've always had a problem with it going, okay, well, Aborigines made it to Australia 50,000 years ago, so 51,000 years ago they had a boat, right? But you can see how primitive they are, and those islanders did the same thing, and you can see kind of how primitive they are. Well, there's these people that are definitely not that primitive. Are you willing to think they had a boat? That they got around, that they showed up and those people saw it and they started making boats. Hello, hello, knock on wood. It's kind of funny when it shows that. You got these spacemen here and these primitives, and they're going, the primitives made these boats and did it, but the spacemen never did. Yeah, and they thought the world was flat too. You still with me? Right. Strange fears of Costa Rica. Another strange discovery was made in Costa Rica also in the 1950s. Hundreds of perfectly shaped spheres made out of volcanic rock were scattered in the jungle. Similar spheres have been located in Guatemala and Mexico, but nowhere else in the world. A number of questions have been raised with the discovery of these balls. What ancient race could have polished them so perfectly? What was the purpose of them? Are they natural geological formations? It doesn't look like it. They're too perfect for something like that to happen. But some scientists have said that they're just natural. And then you look at them, we're fixing to look at a picture, it just doesn't come across as that. Some rest on stone platforms, others are arranged in clusters, then again others are in geometric patterns forming triangles, squares, or circles. Do they have any astronomical significance in the manner of Stonehenge or type of things? Well, one doesn't know necessarily, but you look at how perfectly round these things are, and it's not even kinda round, people. This is as round as any thing. I remember when we were a kid, we had a earth ball. It was like a soccer ball, but the thing was huge. Huge, huge, huge. And that's what these look like to me, except for they're made out of solid granite. And how are you going to make that rounded off over time and with the weapons that you give or the tools that you give these people? And there's no way of dating this, of course, so it could be 100,000 years old. But you would think if they sat there for that long, they would get some erosion on them and some effect you could probably notice. So let's go on to the next part, if you will, and I'll try to put them back to back, I guess, if I can. Should be able to. So in your top left-hand corner, we'll go on to part 2 of a 4-parter. Hey, leave a comment real quick. Hit that like button. Peace.